And then she gave me like a couple papers to read about people who have been delivered from this, and also a long video about this guy who was feminine but not gay. His grandpa molested him for 5 years, and he was feminine, so everyone called him a fag. And so now he's saying that those things caused him to believe that he was gay, and that he had gay friends, and that he went on to a student exchange program and the people in the house he was in were gay. I can't say anything to his particular story. It's like if she was saying, now, when you were born, um, you know, when you were born, you look pretty white. Your hair was kind of straight and thin. You look just like all the other babies. And have you had any trauma? And you're like, well, or like, when did you first suspect you were black? And you're like, well, one time for lunch, my mom packed me collard greens, and she's like, oh, I can imagine how traumatic that must be. And because you had those collard greens, you must have started believing that you were black. And then, because of those, you know, as you grew older, you started getting a little pigment in your skin, and people started calling you black. That must have been traumatizing, you know. Well, they just helped you along. You weren't gonna be black, but because they started calling you black, then, all of a sudden you're black. No, that's just what I am. And whether or not I had collard greens, I'd still be black. Whether or not I liked hip hop, I'd still be black. I know black people who fit none of those. So it's not any of them. It also confuses me because it's like I know what God is telling me. It's not like, I'm just off doing my own thing for what I believe. Every time, I don't pray for specific things. I pray for what God wants. And, you know, every time and every time it leads to, you know, this message that LGBT people and Christianity are not mutually exclusive. When I was watching the video, he was gay, and then he felt bad for being gay, so he wanted to be trans. And he, laid himself down before the Lord and said, Lord, send me a sign. And they shut down the trans clinic that was like the #1 in the world, like Hopkins University trans clinic or something like that. And now he's straight, with married and with a child that he fathered. And he said that the Lord came to him in a spirit and saying, you don't have to do this anymore, or whatever, or just love me more than that. And that's another thing. It's like it's good and then it's bad to say that. I think it's good if you come to it in your own realization, but to tell somebody else that if they're struggling, they don't love God enough, or they love their issue more than God, that's not helpful and it's not healthy. It's like, I don't want to judge what he's doing, but with it being almost the polar opposite of mine, it's hard not to compare or, figure out, well, like we can't have both. God couldn't have said do both. When I did figure out that it was an ex-gay counselor, it was not just because of what she was saying, but as I was thinking more and more about the tactics she was using, it reminded me of this article I'd read about ex-gay camps, about a guy who was neither gay nor Christian, who went into an ex-gay camp facility and reported what he said, or what he saw, what he experienced. And one of the things was that they were doing was, saying, well, this must be something to do with your father. So, if they said, well, I didn't have a father in the home, so then they were to, close their eyes and be hugged and imagine that that was their father's touch and stuff. Or, saying that their father shrugged them off one day and didn't want to play frisbee, or catch, and wanted to read the paper and saying that the father wasn't a good father, and that was saying that the paper was more important to him than his son. And so, he proceeded to basically beat up his dad, um, like figuratively or whatever. Um, and it's the same thing, without acting it out, it's the same thing. It's picking one moment in your life or one person in your life and saying that, it just doesn't make sense to me. But because I know a lot of people, a lot of guys who were raised in a home of just female, in a home with just mom, have two sisters. When mom's out working a double shift, they're over at grandma's house or auntie's house or whatever, and their sisters, made them play dress up and, taught them how to braid hair and stuff, and they're still straight. I feel like there would be no way that the black community could be labeled more homophobic if not having a father in the home was the key to making someone gay. So I don't really buy that. Like my mom was describing me um, to the therapist. She was saying that like I have an activist spirit and that once I'm behind something, I'm really behind it. And I guess my only concern um, in this season of my life is that I'm behind the wrong thing. That's what I don't want. That was my weekend.